Civilizations didn't collapse because they were weak. They collapsed because someone looked at enough and whispered, more gold, more land, more control, more profit, and in that single moment survival became optional. Today, we expose 10 times in history when humanity could have survived, could have stabilized, could have chosen balance. But greed entered the room, and everything burned. If you're ready to confront the most dangerous human instinct ever recorded, subscribe now, because Top 10 Untold doesn't tell comfortable history. We tell the kind that stares back at you. Let's begin. Warning: 10 Roman tax farming. When empire sold its own lifeline. The Roman Empire didn't fall in a day. It eroded. And one of the sharpest knives in its back was something disturbingly modern: outsourced greed. Rome had conquered vast territories. To manage tax collection across its provinces, it created a system called tax farming. Wealthy elites known as publicani would pay the state up front for the right to collect taxes in a region. Whatever they collected beyond that, pure profit. At first, it seemed efficient. Rome received guaranteed revenue. Bureaucracy stayed small. But then greed entered. Publicani began squeezing provinces mercilessly. Farmers were taxed beyond their means. Cities were drained. Local economies suffocated. Revolts sparked. The system incentivized maximum extraction, not sustainability. Rome could have maintained loyalty through fairness. Instead, it weaponized taxation. The result: provincial hatred, economic instability, widening inequality. The empire didn't just fight barbarians at its borders. It rotted internally because survival wasn't as profitable as exploitation. Present parallel: modern privatized systems from debt collection agencies to corporate monopolies operate under similar logic. When profit becomes detached from social responsibility, systems cannibalize themselves. Future question: when governments outsource critical systems to entities whose only mission is profit, who protects the public? Warning: 9 The medieval indulgence economy, selling salvation. In medieval Europe, survival wasn't just physical. It was eternal. The Church held immense spiritual authority. And for centuries, salvation was sacred. Then came indulgences. Pay money, and your time in purgatory would be reduced. At first, indulgences were limited, tied to acts of devotion. But as construction projects expanded and political ambitions grew, indulgences became commercialized. Salvation had a price tag. Peasants already struggling paid in fear. Families sold possessions to save loved ones. The wealth of the church expanded dramatically. It wasn't faith that collapsed society. It was monetized fear. The corruption triggered outrage, most famously through figures like Martin Luther, who challenged the system in 1517. The result: the Protestant Reformation. Religious wars. Europe fractured. Survival of unity was possible. But greed transformed spiritual security into a marketplace. Present parallel. Today, industries monetize fear, health scares, financial insecurity, self-worth. The product changes. The psychology doesn't. Future question: when belief systems, religious or secular, become transactional, how long before trust collapses entirely? Warning: 8 Colonial resource extraction. when discovery meant drainage. Colonial expansion was framed as exploration. In reality, it was extraction. European powers entered Africa, Asia, and the Americas with overwhelming force and a singular mission: extract maximum wealth. Gold, silver, spices, rubber, sugar. But here's the key truth. Colonial systems were not designed for long-term stability. They were designed for rapid gain. Local economies were reshaped to serve imperial centers. Land was stripped. Populations were enslaved or coerced. Sustainability was irrelevant. Take the rubber boom in the Congo under Leopold II. Quotas were brutal. Failure meant mutilation. Millions died. The colony could have developed gradually. Trade could have been balanced. Instead, greed turned resource-rich lands into humanitarian disasters. Present parallel. Resource-rich regions today still suffer from resource curse dynamics where abundance attracts exploitation rather than stability. Future question. If Earth's remaining rare minerals become essential for AI, batteries, and energy systems, will we repeat the colonial extraction cycle? Warning 7. The expansion of the slave trade, scaling human suffering. Slavery existed for millennia, but the transatlantic slave trade industrialized it. Why? Because plantation economies realized something horrifying. Enslaved labor meant exponential profit. As demand for sugar, cotton, and tobacco surged, human beings became units of production. What began as trade escalated into systemic dehumanization. Ships packed beyond capacity, mortality rates accepted as loss margins. It wasn't survival economics. It was profit maximization. The system expanded because it worked financially. Until it didn't. Revolts, moral awakening movements, civil wars and centuries of racial trauma followed. The world could have chosen diversified labor systems. Instead, greed scaled brutality. Present parallel. Whenever human dignity becomes secondary to margins from sweatshops to trafficking, the logic echoes. Future question. In an AI-driven economy, who becomes the disposable labor of tomorrow? Warning 6. The Gilded Age monopolies. When industry devoured society. Late 19th century America experienced explosive growth. Railroads, steel, oil, innovation was real, but so was consolidation. Figures like John D. Rockefeller and Andrew Carnegie built industrial empires. Competition vanished. Wages stagnated. Workers suffered. Monopolies strangled markets. It wasn't growth that endangered survival. It was concentration. When power pooled at the top, systems destabilized. Labor riots erupted. Trust eroded. The system survived barely through regulation. But it was a warning. Unchecked greed doesn't just exploit workers. It reshapes entire nations. Present parallel. Big tech dominance. Market consolidation. Wealth inequality spikes. Future question. If modern monopolies control not oil but data, speech, and digital infrastructure, what happens when regulation fails? Warning 5. 2008 subprime collapse. Packaging risk as gold. The housing market looked stable. Too stable. Banks began issuing subprime mortgages to high-risk borrowers. Then they bundled these risky loans into complex financial products and sold them as safe investments. It was profitable. Ratings were manipulated. Risk models ignored warning signs. Survival of the financial system was possible. But quarterly profit targets were more important. When defaults began, the house of cards collapsed. Global recession. Millions lost homes. It wasn't ignorance. It was engineered greed. Warning for pharmaceutical price exploitation. When health became a luxury, medicine is supposed to save lives. But certain life-saving drugs saw extreme price hikes. The logic: if patients need it, they'll pay. Some executives justified price spikes under the banner of shareholder duty. Survival of trust in healthcare was possible. Instead, public outrage surged. Healthcare became synonymous with financial anxiety. Present parallel. Biotech innovation continues, but so does debate over accessibility. Future question: if gene therapies become mainstream, will survival itself become a premium subscription? Warning: 3 environmental resource stripping. Burning the lifeboat. Forests cleared. Oceans overfished. Fossil fuels extracted at scale. Industrialization lifted billions from poverty. But warnings were known for decades. Short-term profit repeatedly overrode long-term planetary survival. Climate systems destabilize slowly until they don't. The Earth offered balance. Greed demanded acceleration. Present parallel. Carbon markets, greenwashing, delayed transitions. Future question: will future generations view our era as the moment survival was negotiable? Warning: 2 data harvesting economies. Surveillance for sale. You are not the customer. You are the product. Tech platforms discovered that attention could be monetized. Data became oil. The more engagement, the more revenue. Algorithms optimized for addiction, outrage, polarization. It wasn't about connection. It was about extraction. Democratic stability. Secondary. Mental health. Collateral. Survival of civil discourse was possible. But engagement metrics paid better. Warning: 1 speculative cryptomanias. Digital gold rushes. Blockchain technology introduced revolutionary ideas. Decentralization. Transparency. Financial autonomy. But speculation exploded. Tokens launched with no utility. Hype cycles intensified. Influencers fueled euphoria. Greed amplified volatility. Fortunes were made. Fortunes evaporated. The pattern was ancient. Tulips. Railroads. .com. Now crypto. Innovation survives. But speculation repeatedly hijacks survival logic. Greed doesn't knock loudly. It whispers. It says, just a little more. History shows us something terrifying. Civilizations rarely die from sudden invasion. They erode from internal appetite. If this episode made you uncomfortable, good. Because discomfort is the first defense against repetition. Subscribe now. Because the next collapse won't feel like history. It will feel normal. Until it's too late.